Welcome back to No Cap Space, the luxury tax edition. I am your host, Shawnee, joined by Tyler, and we got a local celebrity in the house today.
Hey.
We got the muscle behind the muscles,
Mm.
sports performance coach for your champion South Carolina Gamecocks, Molly Benetti. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
No problem. I'm sure, you've been able to sleep and, kind of
A little
catch your
bit, maybe.
breath because I know it was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
We're gonna get started because we had Camila Cardoso on this show, and there was kind of this pointing Spider-Man meme after her first game where she played against Aaliyah, and she was like, "She's gotten stronger," and I know Aaliyah told you she's gotten stronger. So, what was that like for you to see? Because I know Aaliyah talked to you about it
Yeah.
after the game, didn't she?
Yeah, she texted me. She's like, "Why is Camilla so strong?" Which was funny. Honestly, it's been awesome. That's one of my favorite things is watching them go at it. I watched them the other night. But for her to text me and then Camilla to text me as well too and say that was pretty cool. But um, Camilla's somebody that has come so far in terms of her body. I mean, she came in. I put Camilla. I tell people all the time she's in the top three, if not top five, top three most athletic players I've ever
Mm.
coached. Like she can really do it all for somebody her size, the way that she moves and her strength has come along so much. So yeah, that was kind of a fun little full circle moment.
And we're seeing South Carolina kind of get a reputation as post player U, where we're getting these dominant bigs. What makes the bigs that come through so special and so easy for you to work with?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, skill is always going to be the most undefeated factor in
Mm.
basketball or really in any sport, right? I mean, we're obviously fortunate we get really good recruits.
Right.
Um, I tell people all the time, I can kind of categorize them three ways. They have a really high skill level and really pretty average athleticism. And when I say athleticism, I mean just in terms of in the weight room, like how they move,
Mm.
their strength levels, how they jump, and all of those things. And I would say like 80% of the players that we get actually fall into that category. Like they're really highly skilled, they're really good basketball players, but they're pretty average in the weight room.
Mm.
And then you've got one far end of the spectrum where they have really high skill level and really high athleticism. And that's like your Malaysia Full Wiley. Like she
Hmm.
comes
Yeah,
like just
that's who came to mind. Like that was
That was what I was
exactly.
thinking.
Exactly. And then you've got somebody that comes in and they're obviously skilled. If they weren't skilled, they're going to be there. But I'd say like
right.
at first, pretty average skill level, but really high athleticism. And I
Mm.
think somebody that comes to mind off the bat is like an Ashlyn Watkins.
Hmm.
Like super, super high athleticism, but like even basketball skill wise, like she's barely scratching the
Right.
surface still. So but 80% of them kind of fall into that category. And I would say like for a post player, we know the SEC is the most physical league in all of college basketball.
Hmm.
So they have to be really strong. They've got to be able to move their body, use their body in a variety of ways. And so we're lucky we get really skilled post players. And my job is to help them use their skill and be able to use their body to be able to actually display that on the court. So, I mean, it's everyone says my job is easy. It's not easy by any means,
Right.
but like having that level of skilled athlete or skilled basketball player obviously is makes all of our jobs a lot easier.
Right.
Okay, so like with them falling into that category, did them going undefeated shock you in any way? Just being able to assess them at the beginning of the season and what they were coming in with, did seeing them reach that potential and have an undefeated season that ended in a championship, did that surprise you in any way?
1,000%. I mean, if you would have told any of us at this point last summer that
Mm.
we were going to run the table and go undefeated, we would have said you're out of your damn mind. Like actually remember telling Coach Staley at the beginning of the summer, I'm like, Coach, like I don't know what is going to come of this, but just know that this is probably the least athletic team that I've had in my 6 years here. Like they were really out of shape. They, by testing standards, like not very strong, not very fast. We had a couple outliers, obviously, but
Hmm.
as a whole, super unfit, super undisciplined. And so, like, at this point last year, like, we are all kind of down bad. We're like, man, we could be really good or we're
Hmm.
going to be really bad. I don't
Hmm.
think there's an in between. So, for it to play out the way that it did, I mean, I don't think any of us have even really come to terms with it yet, but it's pretty special to see where they started and to see how they developed throughout the course of the entire year.
So I'm interested because obviously by saying that, but you guys did go undefeated. So from thinking about that time, and obviously there's a level of championship culture now at South Carolina. Just like the standards are set. But for you, what kind of changed, whether it just be habits or mindset from that point in the summer to now looking at to where this team is at now? What were kind of the differences between that made the shift where maybe the flip kind of switched into like, oh, this team can go and really do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really comes down to like the discipline. Like there was just very little discipline at the start of the summer. I mean, from just showing up on time to missing meetings to missing X, Y, and Z, and just like developing those habits every single day. For me, I'm never worried about the work and like where we start the summer physically because I know that's going to take care of itself because we are so consistent in what we do. But it's all the other little stuff, the discipline of their just day to day habits. And I think one thing that Coach Staley has expressed vocally too is like this group was so different than the groups that we had
Right.
the prior 4 years. Like it looked completely different. So I think they kind of defied everything we thought it took to be successful. And we really had to all adapt and kind of let them be who they are and let them be they're crazy. They're like you probably heard the daycare
The
references
daycare,
all
yep,
year. Like
yep.
truly, like we coached basketball and we ran a full-time daycare at the same time. So like letting them be who they are and like adapting to them while still holding everybody to a really high standard, I think is like that's the making of a good coach. And like
Right.
it doesn't surprise me that we ended up it surprises me, but also doesn't surprise me that
Mm-hmm.
we had the season that we did because I wholeheartedly believe that we have the best staff in terms of taking a player, meeting them where they are, and then helping them develop to make them who they ended up being that season. And so it's I think a testament to just how we develop our players, but it really comes down to having that high standard, but
Mm-hmm.
being flexible in our approach to how we get our players to meet that standard, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
that's intriguing to me because it could be very easy for a school like South Carolina to be like, oh, you're coming here and we're gonna do it the South Carolina way, as
Right.
opposed to hearing that and hearing that flexibility. So from kind of the inside perspective, when it comes to figuring out like, okay, this is how this individual functions and this one, and from a coaching perspective, how does South Carolina go about figuring out what is the best way I can make this individual player the best that they can be and kind of adapt to that as opposed to just saying you're going to do this the South Carolina way. Where is that kind of balance and how does that balance get found?
Yeah, there's definitely both, right? Like if you come to South Carolina, you know what the
Mm-hmm.
standard is, you know what the expectations are. But I think that's what Coach Staley does better than anyone else in the country is building the relationships with our players. And like the standard is the standard, but how each player kind of navigates that standard is different. And I think it comes down to the time that we spend building relationships with our players. And that sounds cliche, and I know everybody talks about that and the relationship piece of it, but truly, like in order to have a really high functioning culture, you have to have relationships that
For
are
sure.
strong enough to handle the truth. And so I think that's one thing, and we're so transparent with our players.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Staley's as real as it gets, like good, the bad, the ugly. There's no sugarcoating anything. There's no avoiding hard conversations. And so it's really just getting to know each player, how they respond, um, and being able to communicate with them in a way that's effective. And that's the really hard part of coaching. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not hard to coach basketball. It's not hard to coach or to train athletes in the weight room. Like that part is honestly the easy part. The
Mm-hmm.
hard part is working with people
Yeah.
and getting the most out of them,
Right.
right? And so I just I mean I may be biased, but I've been around a lot of really high level programs and teams, and I think that's what separates South Carolina from the rest.
Mm-hmm.
So with that standard, because at this point you've had the luxury of dealing with a couple post championship teams. So like, what is the mindset now heading into a season after you've already won, after that work? How do you keep the buy-in and the level high? And what are your goals now for the players? Because I know you've got some new pieces, but you've got those pieces that are
Right.
like we know what to do now. How do you mesh that and like what becomes the goal now heading into the preseason?
Yeah, I think that's always the challenge, right? But I think it's fun because we have the whole core back,
Right.
and now they've got that year under their belt to now like they've got this confidence about them. Like at this point last year, they didn't know what they could be. They didn't know how good they could be. They didn't really know what they were capable of, and they know that now. And I think even after last year, like we're truly still scratching the surface because we have such a young team.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we have everybody back and we have a couple of new pieces, like there's an infinite amount of possibilities of how we can kind of change things up, different rotations, different lineups, different get players to evolve their game in different ways. And so I think having that year now, like it's night and day from where we were at this time last summer. They know that what the expectations are. They know what they're capable of, but they also know like they have so much room to grow. And so motivation's never really an issue. Like obviously they don't come to South Carolina just to lift weights, like they come to play basketball. So I'm always keeping that in the back of my mind. Like I want to make our environment highly competitive, fun, engaging, so I get the most out of them. But like basketball wise, like they know like they're not even close to where they could be. So having to like really pull that motivation out of them is not really the issue. And now it's just like, okay, as coaching staffs, we got to continue to find creative ways to reach their potential because they're already really, really good. So now
Yeah.
how can we make those changes? And that's always the challenge.
And then, you had mentioned again, like that 80% where they fall. Now you're able to kind of measure where they were when you first met them. Just what are you looking for in terms of like the athleticism and how do you measure that and kind of push them to, a new limit coming into this season?
Yeah. I mean, obviously we test and we measure things in the weight room, but what I found is that that doesn't always correlate to being a better basketball player. Like I can make somebody jump higher, I can make somebody squat more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to show out on the court. And so for me, I'm always thinking, how can I influence their skill the best way possible? I'm not just worried about how much they can lift or how much they can bench or jump or whatever it is, because I found our best players that we've had come through are typically, again, very average when it comes to how they test. So my challenge is for me, like I study them, I watch them play. Like I watch them play. I talk with our coaching staff about what it is they need from them out on the court. I watch them move. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm trying to make them the best movers possible. You look at the best athletes that play basketball. Like you look at a Steph Curry, you look at a Kyrie Irving, like the way that they move on the court is
Insane.
incredible.
Yeah.
So like if what I'm doing is not impacting that, then I'm not doing my job. Like, yes, my job is to get them stronger, more fit, all of those things. But I think for me, that layer underneath is like, okay, yes, getting them strong is easy. Getting them to jump higher, run faster is pretty easy. Okay, how do I translate what we're doing in the weight room to the court? And so it's really an individual kind of process and working with our coaching staff to get their bodies constantly feeling good. That's always my main goal. Like I want them leaving me feeling like they can go hoop all the time. I don't want what I do to impact what they do on the court in a negative way at any point in the year. So it's just like under kind of uncovering those layers of the basketball skill piece, and then okay, how can I help solve the problem that we need to get them to play basketball at higher level on the court?
Right.
Okay, so kind of like they feel they have the energy and they're not like too, you're not wearing them out trying to make these gains and make, reach personal best in the physical aspect, but like they just have the energy to do what they need to do.
Yeah, if they're leaving me and they are crushed and they can't go play basketball, then what? Like, yes, there's
Mm-hmm.
times of the year, like this time of the year, I don't care if they're as sore, but my goal is not to crush them. My goal is not to uh make them so sore or
Right.
tired that they can't go hoop. Like that's not why they're here to hoop.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So, and I think we train every single day. So I don't need to absolutely crush them. My goal is that they can keep showing up and we can continue to still get productive work in day to day. I treat it the same way in season. We lift every day that we practice. So my goal, shifts from obviously right now is our building time. And then in season is always, what are we doing to work on our body so you feel good so you can go to practice and feel good. I always want you feeling better than when you walked in.
Okay, because that was going to be my question. Like, what is your role during the season when it comes to practices? So you're kind of observing and seeing, like, what can we do here to like help this person, reach their best movement wise. And so, you kind of have to sit back and watch the practices.
Oh yeah, I'm at every practice. I travel with the team. I mean, they spend more time with me year round than probably anybody on staff, which
Mhm.
I'm sure they love. But yeah, I'm in film with them. I'm at practice. Anything that we do as a team, I'm a part of, and so I'm basically just an extension of our coaching staff. And so in season, we do something every single day, but the time that we spend in the weight room is much shorter. So we might be 15 to 30 minutes a day, 4 days a week. And it's always the goal is always to, again, leave them feeling better than when they walked in. And then obviously, based on their role on the team, will determine what they're doing with me throughout the course of a season, and how many minutes they're playing and things like that. And it's always, again, to help them feel the best they can possibly feel on game day.
I'm also interested. I feel like you have been able to make a pretty solid connection with the South Carolina fans, especially through Twitter and everything. I mean, the fans on Twitter always are locked in across the board.
Oh, yeah.
I am interested though in just kind of in your journey, over the course of your career and getting to South Carolina. Like when you get like the first call and be like, hey, we want you here, and how from that point to now, because you mentioned being with other top programs, things of that nature, and seeing the standards at South Carolina, what to you kind of makes those standards specifically stand out as opposed to maybe other programs that you had kind of been around and other staffs that you had been around in prior years?
Yeah, I think coming into this program, I mean, they were a year removed from their first national championship.
Mm-hmm.
I was 28 when I got here. I had been in the profession, I think 5 years. Yeah, 5 years at that point, like full time, but I was
Mm-hmm.
still very young. And then you come into a program like this, you're working for Dawn Staley, and I'm like, man, I put a ton of pressure on myself. And like, that it's a high expectation,
Mm-hmm.
high standard environment. And so it's really like, I always knew I wanted to be in a role like this. And
Mm.
I remember being on the phone with coach when she offered me the job, and she's like, we're going to win a national championship together. And I was like, okay, bet. Like
That's pretty easy
thinking,
sell right
yeah,
there.
I'm like, okay, great.
Yeah, that's what you want to
I'm
do.
like, I
Yeah.
think we are, but like, you never know, right? Like it's
Right.
never guaranteed. And so I think, what like just throughout the course of these 6 years, like to see how it's evolved, like I really just try to stay in my lane my first year or two, and um just learn. Like
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason obviously this job is so appealing is like I wanted to come learn from Coach Staley, like as a just a badass woman
Mm-hmm.
in the field of like in the world of sports and just like life in general. Like just being able to learn from her as another coach was such an appeal. So like just learning how she operates, how she navigates all the hard things, like how she coaches, and then like just being able to learn her and then figure out like what it is she needs from me to make our team go. Like what does she need them to be prepared for? And then just trying to live out those expectations. Like I said, they spend so much time with me in comparison to our coaching staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I have to be that standard setter. I have to be that, the one that lays the expectations too. And that starts there. And then just trying to be as much of an extension of Coach Staley as possible. Obviously not try to be her because I know you can't even touch her, right?
Right.
But like under understanding what she needs from me, and then just trying to continue to evolve that year by year.
And then to kind of expand that out, because you're from Wisconsin, right?
Yes,
So how did and then you were at Louisville prior. How does
yes.
someone end up, in Bojangles country?
Whew. Yeah, that's a. I never would have like guessed that the script would kind of write itself like it has, but I think when I was in grad school, I had gone to a conference, a strength and conditioning conference, and there were a lot of basketball strength coaches there. Like basketball was always my sport. Like I played it. I was never very good. Like I played club in college, but like I could sit and shoot and that's about it. Right. But I met at the time, her name is Katie Fowler. She was at Maryland. She was the head women's basketball strength coach at Maryland, but she would later go on to take this job at South Carolina. And so I met her really early on in my career. And then when I took the job at Louisville, I was the assistant with women's basketball. And I had a couple other sports, but like I was always involved with basketball. I always knew that at some point that was the route I wanted to go, and just be basketball only.
Mm.
And so when Katie was at South Carolina and she was leaving to move on, she the coaches asked her who they needed to call, and she knew that I was involved with basketball. Obviously, she knew that's the route that I wanted to take, and so she told them to call me. And somehow, actually, she called me after my third year at Louisville and asked if I was interested, and I was like, no, I'm actually like, it just in my gut didn't feel like the right time. I just kind of gotten a raise, a new responsibility. I was in a really good
Right.
spot, and I was like, no, like I don't think this is the right time. She ended up staying for a year and then gave me a call a year later, and she was like, listen, like, I'm leaving for real this time. Like, the coaches are going to be calling you, so answer your phone. I was like,
Mm.
okay, okay, got it. And so I got a call later that night, and the process started from there. But um, yeah, never thought I would end up here. Never thought that, every job I've taken just ended or landed me a little bit further south. And now this is, yeah, going on year 7 and feels like home.
So basically, women helping women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
All
Exactly.
right. We love to see it.
We
And
do.
going back, because you did mention, well, Tyler did, about how you connect with the fans, and Don Staley does that with this community in a way that I've never seen with any other coach. Is that something that trickles down to where you're doing Body by Binetti, so the rest of us can get that championship feeling and experience through your programs?
Yeah, like I knew coming in to this job, like I knew they had a really strong fan base, and that was one thing I loved. I thought was really cool about Louisville. Louisville also has a really strong fan base. Like they're usually in the top 5, I think, for
Yeah,
attendance and stuff
they're up
like that.
there.
And I was like, that's really cool. And then I got here, and I knew it was strong, but I've never experienced anything like it here. And like it really is like one of the most moving things to see how our program has an effect on the people, not just in Colombia, but honestly
Mm-hmm.
across the entire
Yeah,
country. Like
right.
what Coach Staley means to people, what our program and our players mean to people, and like they really embrace the entire staff. Like for years, and that's really like how Body by Binetti even like became a thing, is because our fans like picked up on it and kind of took it and ran with it. And I think during COVID, they were looking for training programs, and then like obviously our team was having a lot of success, and like the physical nature of how we play and things like that was gaining attention. And so like they've been asking me for training programs, they've wanted shirts for years, like all like they've been team like Body by Binetti for a while now. And so like the way that the community has embraced our program, the way it has embraced me, like is unlike anything I've ever experience. And it's I think one of my favorite parts of this job is just how much we mean to just the community of basketball, like people in this city, the way that they latch on to us, and like it's a pretty cool thing to be a part of.
Is
And it's
there?
still available, right?
Yeah.
Body by Benetti.
What was that?
Body by Benetti is still available.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Go ahead and plug it. Go
I
ahead
do
and
in
plug
Yeah.
it.
person. Yeah. I do in-person training in Colombia. I also do a lot of online training,
There you
all
go.
app based on your phone, things like that.
Be
So
built for the
it's been pretty
SEC.
cool. What was that?
Man,
You got to be built for the SEC.
yeah,
Oh
hey,
yeah,
look,
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
that's
I will tell
football
you, I'll say
season.
this, like it was incredible. So they've been asking me for these programs, and the first one I created was just a body weight program. So I really truly like I wanted everybody to be able to do it, like any age, any ability, all of
Mm,
no equipment, and like the way that it is taken off is this is my best selling program out of
Mm,
any of them.
mm-hmm.
And like initially it was like all fans, like people from every like state in America. Is pretty cool. Um, but yeah, they it's like they have a small piece of like feeling like they're part of it, or
Right.
like they've got
yeah,
some connection to it. Yeah.
train like a champion and cheer for the champions. So,
Right.
y'all go sign up
There
and
you
get your
go.
health right.
Right.
That's
So,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
okay, no, you got it.
Well, I am interested because you mentioned the connection that with the fans and everything across the country. I think that's a great point to make because it's not just like it is truly like a countrywide thing. Like there's so many people that resonate with Don and this program. For you, is there a moment in whether it's with Don or the players or anything like that sticks out to you when you think about a really dope moment between the fans and this program that just kind of sticks out in your mind that you've seen? Because I feel like we see so much of it just generally, but I'm sure that there's so many like personal and more kind of one-to-one type moments that we don't get to see on whether it be social media or whatever. Is there one like that that just kind of sticks out to you that's like, man, like this is when I maybe when you realize like this community is different when it comes to this program?
Man, putting me on the spot.
I know I did. I'm sure
I'm
there's a lot of
sure
them.
there are many, but I think honestly, and this is maybe a little bit like bigger picture one, but
Mm-hmm.
I think honestly, just like this past year, like the amount of fans that we had in Paris, like people
Mm.
that traveled to
It's
Paris, like we
insane.
sold that place out, and like 95% of the people in that arena were Gamecocks fans. You'd be like walking around Paris and you'd see people in like South Carolina shirts, and you're like, this is
It's
crazy. Like
insane.
people
Yeah.
will fly across the world to support our team. Like that's like a more bigger picture. And I know there's many more like smaller, intimate
Right.
moments for sure, and that I won't be able to think of now. But that like that's one to me where I was like,
Yeah,
how
that's
many
wild.
how many other program like I know other fan bases travel, but like not like
Yeah,
that.
that's
Like that
different.
was insane.
That's different. That's
Now,
there's
and I've
Yeah,
said that y'all can have a preseason game on the moon, and G Hive will figure out how to do it. Like
for
they'll
real.
meet y'all there
For
at the
real.
landing spot.
Yes.
So, my final question, because I know, you're a very busy woman being a champion and whatnot, and the work never stops. But like in this age where, kids are playing more games and starting
Mm,
earlier and putting more wear and tear on their body before they get to you, how do you how do you take that into consideration and do what you need to do to prevent injury? Like, what's really the biggest technique to where you're getting the most out of them and preparing them for a long, grueling season in a very physical conference, but still, we haven't seen a whole bunch of, season ending injuries from, our players over the years.
Yeah. That's always the biggest challenge. The amount of volume that these kids are going through and playing right now is insane. And you hear a lot about like all these injuries happening to female athletes. And
mm,
honestly, one of the biggest reasons is like if you look at boys and girls, like boys start training at a much earlier age than girls do. And like so as you're going through puberty, like boys are already training, like their muscle mass kind of increases along with them kind of going through that puberty phase. Like in girls, they go through puberty, they're not training, but as you go through puberty, like your body weight is increasing, but it's usually body fat and not muscle, especially like if you're not doing any sort of strength training and things like that. So you've got this increase in body mass, you've got this increase in fat mass, and then you're playing sports all year round. Like something bad is bound to happen. Like
mm.
that's just the nature of it. So you're seeing like this, what seems like an increase in rise in injuries in females, but it's just like being highlighted a lot more. But like I always tell people all the time, like the earlier that girls can start resistance training, the better, especially through puberty, because you want that muscle mass to be increasing at the same rate,
Mm.
if not more than your body weight and fat mass is increasing, if that makes sense. So now you're
Yep.
getting these younger girls getting injured. So they're already having ACLs and things like that before they get to us. And so, like, for me, the best injury prevention is just like you've got to have really good training, like consistently, like all the time. And so that's my approach is like everything that we do, it's not just lifting weights. Like, if you look at how people get injured, like they've got to move in a variety of ways, they've got to be able to like evade people. Like, typically, when you get hurt or you tear your ACL, it's when you're either landing or cutting
Mm.
and there's usually another person or another object
Yeah.
involved that you have to react to, and so your body is so I'm always thinking about ways to train our athletes in ways that actually make sense and not just kind of staying in one place, squatting, lifting weights, just trying to get stronger because that's not enough to prevent them from injury. So if you look at the way that we train, it's a little maybe unconventional than
Mm.
what you typically see in a college weight room. Um, but it's incorporating every aspect of balance. And we know we do a ton of like crawling and gymnastics and tumbling and we do all kinds of like reactive jumping and landing in a multitude of different ways and we train in a bunch of different ways and so I think like obviously when they get to me like I can only control so much. I can't
Right.
control anything really until they get to me, but once they get to me I'm just trying to be as consistent as possible in slow cooking their development because we're lucky. Like I can count on one hand the amount of players we've had transfer out in my 6 years, and I can count on one hand really the amount of players we've had transfer in. So like
Mm.
I get to develop our kids for 3, 4, sometimes 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So like that over time, taking that slow cooking approach, like obviously knock on wood, we've had a 98% availability rate the last 6 years, which is unheard of.
Yeah, it's insane.
We haven't had a season-ending injury since 2021, and we've only had 2 since I've been here.
Right.
So it's not just me. You have to have a head coach that gets it too. And coach it like is hard and demanding, and we practice hard, but we're not getting crushed for 3 hours every day. We're not,
Yeah.
We're not just running them into the ground. Like we train hard, we practice hard, but we're doing just enough every day to continue to get better and never going to the point of no return, essentially.
Right.
Well,
Shawnee, if I could get one more in, just super
well,
quick.
we don't have time. It's going.
No.
That's my bad, dog. I gotta upgrade. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I'll leave it for the next time. We'll talk next time, Molly.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So if y'all could go sign up for Body by Benetti.
There you go. That's the real thing.
Train like a champion. And Molly, we thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And good luck this upcoming year.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys for having me on.